All right, today we're diving deep into a dessert that looks so simple, but is actually a total masterpiece of baking science. We're talking about the classic Italian orange cake. We're going to figure out how just a few ingredients, when you combine them with the right chemistry, create a cake that's just unbelievably tender and packed with flavor. So let's get into it. And this quote, it just nails the whole vibe of this cake, doesn't it? It's a perfect example of that Italian philosophy where you let simple, amazing ingredients do all the talking. You don't need a bunch of fancy frosting because all the beauty and flavor is baked right in. But that elegance, that simplicity, it is absolutely not an accident. It's the result of some really smart science. So that really is the million-dollar question, right? How does a cake with such a basic shopping list end up with a texture and a flavor that's just unforgettable? Well, the answer isn't some single secret ingredient. It's actually a series of smart, scientific choices that all just work together in perfect harmony. And the very first, most important choice is this one right here. The decision to use oil instead of butter is really the foundational secret to this cake's amazing texture. This one little swap literally changes everything on a molecular level. This chart breaks it down perfectly. You know butter cakes, right? Butter's only about 80% fat, so it creates a denser cake that gets hard as a rock in the fridge. Now oil's 100% fat, and that means an oil-based cake is incredibly tender, it stays moist for days, and it's still soft even when it's chilled. Plus, because oil is so neutral, it lets that bright, zesty orange flavor just pop. Okay, so let's get a little nerdy for a second, because this is the core science. When you mix flour and liquid, these proteins called gluten form, and too much gluten can make a cake tough. But oil is a superhero here. It's amazing at coating those flour proteins, basically putting a roadblock up so they can't form long, chewy gluten strands. This whole process is called gluten inhibition, and it's the reason an oil cake has that fine, delicate, and super tender crumb. It's pure kitchen chemistry. But, oil can't do all the heavy lifting by itself. To get to that level of perfection, it needs a really good support system. So now, let's look at the next two pillars holding this cake up. Using the right kind of flour, and understanding the huge role that eggs play. So you see this number on the screen? 8 to 9%. What on earth is that about? Well, this is the ideal protein content for our flour. Remember how we were just talking about stopping gluten from forming? Well, a huge head start is just to start with a flour that has less protein to begin with. This range right here, that is the sweet spot for pastry or cake flour. And this chart just lays it all out. Crystal clear. Over on the left, you've got your pastry and cake flour, right? In that 8 to 9% happy place. Now, compare that to your standard all-purpose flour, which can have up to 12% protein. That extra protein is awesome if you're making bread, but for a delicate cake like this one, it's a liability. So choosing a low-protein flour is really our second key to guaranteeing a tender cake. Now, for our second pillar, eggs. And the single most important rule is right there on the screen. Using room temperature eggs is completely non-negotiable. Why? Well, think of it this way. The proteins in warmer eggs are more relaxed and flexible, which lets them stretch and trap a whole lot more air when you whip them. And more air means more volume and a lighter cake. Seriously, eggs are the ultimate multitaskers in this recipe. They're doing 4 critical jobs at once. First, they provide leavening, trapping all that air when they're whipped with sugar. Second, their proteins literally create the cake's structure as it bakes. Third, they're the emulsifier, the glue that holds the oil and orange juice together. And finally, of course, they add all that richness, flavor, and moisture. They're doing it all. So, we've got our perfect ingredients lined up. We're all set, right? Well, not quite. The real magic happens in how we combine them. You can have the best ingredients on the planet, but they won't save you if your technique is off. This is where the science really comes to life. The whole mixing process really just boils down to these 3 key moments. First, you whip the eggs and sugar like crazy to build that light, airy, ribbon-like foundation. Second, you drizzle that oil in super slowly to create a stable, beautiful, glossy batter. And third, and this is so important, you gently fold in the dry ingredients because you want to minimize that gluten development we keep talking about. Every single step is a direct application of the science. And hey, you don't have to just take my word for it. The experts over at the King Arthur Baking Company totally back this up. They make it clear that getting that first step right, the whipping, is absolutely crucial. If you don't whip enough air into it, you're going to get a dense, heavy cake. Period. It's that simple. Now, one of the most amazing results of all this science is the cake's incredible shelf life. Let's take a look at how this cake performs long after it's out of the oven and what it really represents in the bigger picture. Okay, this is one of the biggest payoffs for using oil. Day 1, of course, it's amazing. But check this out. By day 4, it is still perfectly moist, just sitting on the counter. That's almost unheard of for a butter cake. And its texture is still excellent even after 3 months in the freezer. This isn't just a cake for today. It's a cake that lasts all week. So when you step back, you realize this cake is so much more than just a recipe. It really embodies an entire way of thinking about food. It's about that Italian philosophy of taking simple, seasonal ingredients, like a perfect orange, and using thoughtful, scientifically sound technique to turn them into something truly extraordinary. It's all about celebrating technique over just having a long list of ingredients. And that kind of leaves us with a final thought to chew on. Today, we've seen how understanding the why behind the how can turn a simple orange cake into a work of art. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other baking secrets could be unlocked just by looking a little closer at the science hiding in plain sight in your other favorite recipes? Thanks for joining me on this delicious deep dive.